were able to mobilize a large amount of public will to really take action on the coronavirus crisis. And so we should be aiming to do the same thing when it comes to the climate crisis.
Going back to normal is not what we want. We need a green and just recovery.
We have to keep fighting to save our planet. Some people won't listen, but we need to make them listen before it's too late.
So good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you all, ambassadors, member states, young people, and all others joining us today. This is a really important morning, an intergenerational discussion on recovering better and greener for after COVID. Ireland is thrilled to be co-hosting this event with our dear partners, the Marshall Islands, and particularly a big sincere thank you to my dear friend, Ambassador Matlan Kuba of the Marshall Islands for her work, and for the tireless work also of Tina Stieg, who is with us today and has also been working alongside us for more than a year at this stage. We want to thank also the Secretary General's Youth Envoy, wonderful Jayathma, and her absolutely excellent team, and to welcome the Assistant Secretary General also for climate action. I'm very honored that we're joined all the way across the Atlantic this morning by the Minister for Climate Action and Environment of Ireland, Minister Richard Bruton. The Minister is no stranger to you and to the UN. He's a minister who takes a deep and passionate interest in this subject. He was with us at the Youth Climate Summit in 2019 and has made huge strides in Ireland in engaging youth in the youth community, but also youth ideas and harnessing the energy for the development of Ireland's climate action policies. I know he's very committed to being with us this morning despite a busy agenda in Ireland, and will listen and speak to you a little bit later. Now, today we have 4 segments in the event. We're starting off with an initial opening section where we will hear from keynote speakers. We will then move to hear the important voices of youth, followed by an interactive discussion, which I will come back to you during that interactive period, and then some closing remarks. So before I hand over the floor to Jayathma, who will manage the first session, if I just would make a few housekeeping announcements to you. Those of you from member states now very familiar with the way that we operate these Zoom meetings. So you should, if you'd like to speak, you should signal your interest in the interactive dialogue chat box, which is in the chat box at the top of your screen. I'm very pleased that today, because we're working in difficult circumstances when it comes to multilingualism at the UN, so we've made a special effort today to ensure that we have both captioning, but also interpretation. And we have interpretation into French. So colleagues, if you hit the interpretation button on the top, if you're on an iPad, I think the bottom, if you're on another device, the bottom of your screen, you'll see the interpretation button, and you will be able to listen to interpreted speaking. And then we will also let you know that for youth speakers and member states, you can actually submit questions. We've had questions coming in. We have a wide audience beyond New York, happily. So we will take note of those questions and put them to the floor as we move through the Q&A. So it now remains to me to hand over to the exceptional youth envoy, Jayatma. You have the floor, Jayatma.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Geraldine. Welcome to all the young people, member state representatives. I see a number of ambassadors on the call also asking to take the floor already, and a lot of audience members, young people around the world. It's the 5th of June, so happy World Environment Day to all of you. My name is Jayatma Vikramanayake. I am the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Youth. Whoever you are and wherever you are in the world right now, your life must be in some way or the other impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. While I wish all of you good health, well-being, and safety, I want all of us to think about what is next in these 1.5 hours. How can we use this opportunity to advance change, particularly on the climate agenda that we always wanted to bring? So today we will hear from a number of speakers, both young people and member states on this topic, and particularly looking at what are the different opportunities and entry points that we have into actually turning our words into concrete action. So as countries are easing lockdown measures and slowly opening up their borders, the world is beginning to plan for a post-pandemic recovery. So we at the United Nations, along with the youth climate activists around the world, are calling on governments to seize the opportunity to recover better together by creating a more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive society. And as the generation that will be most impacted by the twin challenges of climate change and the COVID-19, young people should have a seat at the table as their governments are starting to chart a course to recovery. So on Earth Day this year, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres proposed 6 priority actions to shape the COVID-19 recovery. Today, we will have some great speakers, young and maybe not so young as well, who will be sharing their perspectives on the proposed actions and more generally recovering better together from the COVID-19 pandemic. These suggestions and all the young people watching us, your valuable input will inform the Secretary General's climate efforts and be shared in a final report with member states who are actively considering what it means to recover better together. These recommendations today will also be shared with the Secretary General's Climate Advisory Group of member states by our friends and colleagues from Ireland and Marshall Islands. So during this event, we also want to hear from all of you joining us from around the world. So what does recovering better together mean to you? What actions do you think governments should take to address the climate crisis? So please visit this link right here, reachnotpreach.com/youth-poll. Over the next hour and a half, and let us know. We'll be sharing the results of this poll at the end of this interesting conversation today. So you can see the link on the screen right now. It's reachnotpreach.com/youth-poll, and you can go there and you can let us know what you feel about these conversations that are happening right now, real time. And finally, before going into the content of our event today, I want to acknowledge the ongoing protests and global solidarity for racial justice here in New York, in the United States, and around the world. We know that climate justice and racial justice are inextricably linked, and we cannot achieve climate justice without ensuring that there is no space for systemic and individual racism. So many countries right now, people of color and minorities are disproportionately affected by the effects of climate change and other environmental injustices. So the plans to build back better must center around human rights and climate action to ensure that no one is left behind. With that in mind, I would like to send a message of solidarity to all the young people calling for an end to systemic racism in all its forms around the world. With that introduction, let me give you a quick sneak peek of our opening speakers today in the session that I will moderate. We will have Selvin Hart, the Assistant Secretary General of the Climate Action Team at the United Nations, Monica Skadberg, President of the Youth Climate Council from Denmark, Honorable Richard Burton, the Minister of Communications, Climate Action and Environment from Ireland, Elizabeth Cousins, the President and CEO of the United Nations Foundation, who has also been a critical partner today to organize this event. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the Secretary General Special Advisor on Climate, Selvin Hart. Most of you may remember Selvin's name from Paris, and Selvin was instrumental in coordinating the process around the Paris Agreement and is now leading on the Secretary General's vision for climate action and ambition. Selvin, thank you so much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Jadva, thank you so much. It's certainly a pleasure to join all of you, and a good morning to all of you from all over the world on this World Environment Day. On behalf of the Secretary General, I am honored to be sharing this digital stage with young people joining us from around the world. I'd like to extend a special thanks to the United Nations Foundation, my very good friend Elizabeth, the governments of Ireland and the Republic of the Marshall Islands, two small island nations doing really big and great things, and you, Jatma, for your hard work in coordinating and convening this event. This collaboration since the Youth Climate Summit last year has provided a platform for young people to make your voices heard, and it is to be commended. I also thank all the youth partners for helping to shape this event. The Secretary General has asked me to express his very sincere thanks and admiration for the really incredible work of young people and driving the change we urgently need. He has been very clear. You are leading the way with your energy, your ideas, and your relentless determination. We have a long way to go in the race against climate change, but we have also made progress, some progress, incremental progress in recent years. Quite simply, that progress would never have happened without the inspiring efforts of young people. We are in an emergency, and today we want to hear from you. So let me just cut this short and go straight to the chase. This is a very tough time for billions of people around the world, but the challenges are especially acute for many young people. The COVID-19 pandemic is having a disproportionate impact on young people in terms of job losses and disruptions to education and training. More than 1 in 6 young persons aged 18 to 29 has stopped working since the pandemic hit. As a father, I have never been more worried about the future and personal safety of my own 2 children than I am today. We also know the economic outlook is very uncertain. It may be a very long time on the road to recovery. And we know that it's very worrying for many young people, people trying to find their first job or even to advance their careers. And while this crisis unfolds, the climate emergency has not gone anywhere. Accumulated emissions still have us hurtling towards irreversible tipping points. Of course, climate is hitting hard right now, but it is young people who will pay the biggest price over your lifetimes. But we must not lose hope. We can still change course. As the Secretary General has said, the pandemic presents us with a moment when we can and we must do exactly that. We must change course. We must turn this disaster into a turning point for change towards a healthier, inclusive, and more sustainable future for all. Of course, actions speak louder than words. Over the coming weeks and months, governments will make some of the most consequential decisions ever made. As governments decide how they will recover from the COVID-19 crisis, their actions will either take us towards a green, inclusive, and resilient world, or will not. I would go even further. These decisions will determine whether we meet or 1.5 degrees Celsius goal or not. The stakes are very high. And I know it's not fair, but these decisions could determine the future of the planet, your future. This is why the Secretary General has outlined a series of climate positive actions to recover better. And he's presented this menu to all governments. These include delivering new jobs through a green transition, making societies more resilient to climate harm, ending fossil fuel subsidies, and calling on all governments to place climate and Paris Agreement aligned conditionalities on bailouts to large corporations. The actions needed are primarily ones that governments must take to set the direction of travel. But let me be blunt. We will only succeed, we will only recover better together if the voices of young people are truly heard. We need you to call on your leaders to support the Secretary General's call for a green and inclusive recovery, including his 6 climate positive actions, and for them to incorporate these principles in your own country's recovery and stimulus plans. So this is why events like today's event are so important, to hear firsthand from young climate leaders about your perspectives, your concerns, and your solutions. And it is why the Secretary General launched the UN Youth Strategy, Youth 2030, as a blueprint for youth engagement and empowerment. We are here today as part of that strategy. Finally, you're likely aware that COP26 on climate change in Glasgow will now take place in November 2021. But the delay of COP26 does not and must not mean delayed climate action. I want to assure you that climate action remains at the top of our agenda at the United Nations. I also want to assure you that your views and your actions are more important than ever. I want to stress that. Your voices and your actions are more important than ever in helping to shape this agenda. We can build a better world together. As Martin Luther King Jr. once said, change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. With that in mind, I hand back the floor to my very good friend, Jayatma, as we want as much time as possible today to hear from young people. So continue to push us. I encourage you, continue to push us to do better and to act faster. I look forward to today's discussion. I thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Selvin, for those opening remarks. And I want to remind our audience again, you can go and take the poll at the Reach Not Preach platform to let us know how you feel about the conversations that are going right now. And also we have interpretation available, as the ambassador mentioned at the beginning, in Spanish and French. And you can find the interpretation button on the top right corner of the screen. Our next speaker is Honorable Richard Burton, the Ireland's Minister of Communications, Climate Action and Environment. Ireland is co-hosting this event together with us at the United Nations, the Marshall Islands, and the UN Foundation, and youth leaders and climate activists. I'm grateful for Ireland's commitment to including the voices of young people in climate-related decision-making and for pushing other countries to do the same. Honorable Minister, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks very much, Jayatma. And first, can I join with you in expressing solidarity with those who are suffering racial injustice? I think it is chilling to see what's being experienced at present. I'm very honored to be here too, to be part of this conference to discuss how we recover better together. I was present, as you probably recall, when we had the Youth Summit last year, and along with the Marshall Islands, we developed that concept of Cuan Gesh, a pledge that more than 50 countries have signed up to, of engaging young people in the process of setting out policies for climate change. And I think we have made some practical changes here at home. We had young people take over our parliament for a day and set out their demands. We've established youth funds that are helping young people implement practical changes. But I think, as Selwyn said, COVID-19 is a remarkable watershed. It has disrupted our way of life. It has brought great pain and distress to many people. Many people are out of work. It will be a difficult recovery to rebuild. And we will need solidarity, particularly international solidarity of organizations like the UN and the WHO, as we seek a multilateral response to the challenges that are being presented. I think we also need a vision that can bond us together, and that is one of returning, yes, to a prosperous society where people are back at work, but one that's stronger, fairer, more balanced, more sustainable. And I think that is something that is in our reach. We can forge a new social contract emerging from this, building on what we've learned, because we have learned in the course of this crisis that the bonds of community, which perhaps weren't treated as so important, they have been crucial to helping us get through. We've been able to manage, certainly here, huge levels of cooperation with extraordinary restrictions on people's freedom, because people have valued those bonds of community and they have reassessed their values. We've also been forced, I suppose, by the COVID-19 crisis to change our society in so many ways. We are now getting used to remote working. We're doing much less travel. We're using digital technology and e-health in loads of areas where it has been able to deliver what we thought couldn't be delivered in a lockdown. We've also seen nature around us begin to recover as the sort of stresses that we have been putting on it have lessened their grip in recent times during this lockdown. But it's absolutely vital that as we emerge from this crisis, that we embed the sort of structural changes, some of them which have been, the path has been lighted up by, the changes that we had to endure in COVID-19. We can live in a different way. But equally, I suppose there is the risk that in the scramble to rebuild our economies and our societies, we reach for, what is now a cheap oil. Fossil fuels are relatively cheap, and that we would make terrible wrong choices embedding fossil fuel infrastructure into our economies and societies just at the time when we need to make a shift away from them. And I think it's really important that we seize this opportunity, as Selwyn has said, to embed the changes that we all know need to be made. It is an unusual time in my own country in that we have had a general election and we are now in the course of seeking to form a new government. That new government is committed to developing policies which will deliver a 7% per annum reduction in greenhouse gases over the next decade here in Ireland. And we've also been through a period where we've had to introduce in an accelerated way structures to deliver just transition, because one sector of our economy, peace, has been forced to restructure much more rapidly than we thought. We've also brought in carbon pricing for the first time with a trajectory right out to 2030, so that people know that the adverse impact of carbon emitting activities will have to be paid for year in, year out by more expensive changes. So this is a time of opportunity. The economy and society are under pressure, but they also recognize the need to mobilize capital to fix what has been broken. And it's really essential that as we do that, we mobilize that capital to change what have been the habits of a lifetime for many of our sectors. This is a unique opportunity, and it's going to be really important that young people take up the opportunity to shift that dial. And I'm looking forward to hearing some of those ideas that are articulated by you who have that experience, knowledge, and commitment. And above all, you are the future for whom we need to make these changes.
Thank you very much, Minister Burton, for your very valuable opening remarks. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth Cousins. Elizabeth is the President and CEO of the United Nations Foundations. I invite Elizabeth to say a few words to kick us off, but also to express a big thank you to the United Nations Foundation for helping us make this event possible, but also their invaluable contributions to convening the Youth Climate Summit at the United Nations last September. Elizabeth, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jayathma. It's always a great pleasure to work with you and your team. Thank you, Selwyn, Minister Bruton, Ambassador Byrne, Excellencies, young climate activists, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to be here and to join you in opening this important session on youth choice, recovering better together. We already knew this year, 2020, would be consequential. It's the 10-year countdown on the Sustainable Development Goals, and we all know that the clock is ticking on climate change and other Earth systems that shape the habitability and the equity of our world. Enter COVID-19. All our systems, all our plans, all our expectations have been upended by this crisis that was unexpected, even if many also saw it coming. In this country, we are also dealing with a visceral and more chronic crisis over the hold that racism has continued to have on our society and the stain that a long history of racial injustice continues to have on our communities and our collective conscience. Today's event is about recovering better together. As we face and come out of the crises before us, whether COVID-19, racism, or climate change, that is exactly the opportunity we have to recover, to be better, and to take action together if we are imaginative and brave enough to seize it. You know, last September, and Jayathma mentioned this, we were privileged to help the UN and the Office of the Youth Envoy organize the Youth Climate Summit in New York. We were overwhelmed by the thousands of young people around the world, some 7,000 of them, who responded to the call to participate. Young people are not just demanding change, they're already making it happen in their communities, petitioning policymakers, leading community initiatives, communicating the science, protesting for the future, and educating us all. And that's what you're doing here today, bringing ideas to the table, offering tangible, practical solutions to help guide us out of the COVID-19 crisis to a cleaner, more resilient, and more sustainable future for everyone everywhere. Your ideas are strong and powerful, about sustainable policies that generate green jobs, about clean energy, strategies to restore nature, ways to recalibrate our financial system or to rebalance what we value, subsidize, and price. I'm excited for the conversation today, but even more for the conversations, the planning, the strategizing, and the work to follow. This is a hard and complex time. Here in the United States right now, it is a time of acute anguish and anger and grief, even if it is also a time of hope and determination to reject our worst behaviors and claim a future based on our deepest values. Today, as each of us tackles our own national demons, as we work to come out of the collective crisis of COVID-19, and as we redouble our efforts to prevail over the climate emergency all around us, the idea at the heart of the United Nations, born 75 years ago, that we can come together around our deepest common interests and values for a better future should energize all of us. And what a fitting expression of the UN's best possibilities in an event like today's that brings together today's government leaders with the young people who are already taking on the mantle of leadership that will carry us into the future. The UN Foundation is proud to stand alongside you in our shared fights for progress for everyone everywhere. Everyone here gives life to the UN's founding purpose, and we're just really excited to hear your ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for joining, your support, and your comments this morning. And now I'm really pleased to introduce our first youth speaker to all of you. We have Monica Skadberg. Monica is the president of the Youth Climate Council in Denmark, which she will talk about in a bit. And she has also so much experience to share about how the youth movement in her country and all over the world is involved in making sure that youth demands and concerns are heard in the formation of climate policy. Monica, we are so glad to have you here. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So hello out there. My name is Monica Skalbo. I represent Youngo, and that's a youth constituency to the United Nations and especially to the UNFCCC. What we do is we try to bring together the voices of diverse youth organizations as much as possible from the entire world. Now, my own organization is called the Youth Climate Council, and this is a type of structure we built in Denmark because we felt that there was a missing link between the influence young people were trying to get on climate policies by claiming the streets and demonstrating, and then the decision makers who were sitting quite far away from us, we felt. So we now have this channel where we're responsible for gathering the inputs of youth and their policy wishes and then giving it to the government. We've been allowed to send comments to all the draft decisions and also to make our own input and send it directly to the minister. And then he has to meet with us at least twice per year to debate our solutions so we can actually get responses to the new ideas and hold him accountable. We think this type of engagement is really, really important and should happen everywhere on all types of policies, because young people are a group who will be very affected by climate change. We are literally going to pick up the bill of inaction on this. And that makes us a group that has a certain set of interests in the policies. It also makes us a group that gets quite angry, honestly, when people say things like, now there is an economic crisis and we cannot afford climate action right now. Because young people, due to the timeline that we are living in, we are very aware that what we can even less afford is inaction, because inaction is very expensive. Now, if we fail to act quickly now on sustainability and on building back a type of world that doesn't damage the climate and hurt the living of next generations, there's a big bill for inaction coming, and it's coming more quickly than people maybe think when they talk about the next generation. It's very much my tax money, actually. It's within my lifetime that this economic bill hits. And that's just money. I mean, for a lot of young people, they're going to be paying literally with their lives. So that gives us, you can say, different priorities in the policies that we decide to support. Of course, we are aware that there is a health crisis going on right now, and we respect that. And also we respect that there is an economic crisis coming from this health crisis, and that this has also really dangerous consequences for a lot of people. But as climate activists, we also just cannot forget, even though we have these different crises, that forgetting the climate crisis in this situation would just mean losing even more lives. So it's not really an option for us. We also acknowledge that these different crises that we have right now are interlinked, and they come from the same place. They come from failure to implement climate action, failure to implement human rights, failure to implement resilient healthcare systems, and to listen to youth and marginalized groups all over the world. And that's why we keep fighting against these root causes of these crises. And that's, of course, a little bit difficult to do right now in the way that we're used to, but we still fight. For example, today my shoes are protesting. I went to the parliament and I left my shoes in front of there, as did a bunch of other climate activists, because we cannot stand together physically, safely right now, but our shoes can stand there and remind the policymakers that we are still watching them and that we are still very unhappy with the pace of their action on climate change. Now we're facing economic and climate crisis at the same time. And for young people, and especially marginalized people, this means double trouble. And when you're facing two problems at once in such an immediate term as we are, the only responsible thing to do is to look for solutions that solve both of the problems in one go. This, for example, means investing not just in jobs, but in green jobs coming out of the economic crisis. We can do that. It is possible. I'm not saying easy, but it is possible. And we have to now kill two birds with one stone. We're asking for this simply because we only have one stone. And if we miss, there's a lot of lives going to be lost. Because of this, we do demand that Environmental and social sustainability must be integrated when you rebuild after the corona crisis. If you want to give any bailouts to businesses, they really must come with green strings attached. We can simply not waste any money now on fossil fuel subsidies or on funding business as usual. The only way forward is a green recovery. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica, for reminding all of us the generational impacts of climate change on young people today, but also sharing some of the innovative and creative ways that young people are choosing to express their viewpoints and to protest and demonstrate. Thank you for your thoughts. So in the next half an hour or so, we'll be hearing from 3 other young climate leaders and activists. They'll be sharing with us their perspectives on important actions that governments can take now to address the climate crisis and recover better from the COVID-19 pandemic. These actions include creating green jobs, ending subsidies and pricing carbon, and accounting for the climate change related risks and opportunities facing our global financial system. Before our event today, our 3 speakers, Karen, Joshua, and Kyathi, gathered input from young people all over the world by hosting live sessions on the UN's Instagram accounts. So today they'll be speaking both from their own experiences as well as the inputs they received through these live sessions, and also the poll that we are currently conducting. So remember, if you didn't have a chance to join these sessions, you can share your thoughts online. Please visit bit.ly/youth-choice-poll, bit.ly/youth-choice-poll, and go to the poll and express your views about the conversations we are having right now. So after each of our 3 youth speakers' interventions, I'll also hand over the floor to at least one member state representative to briefly respond to what the youth speakers said and share their perspectives on the green recovery. And if they'd like to propose also a question to the youth speaker to further clarify these positions that has come from our extensive consultations with young people. So before we start, let me once again give a quick sneak peek of our youth speakers. We have Karen Proa, who is the co-founder of Youth and Climate Change Network of Costa Rica. We have Joshua Amponsam, Director Executive of the Green Africa Youth Organization, and Kyathi Rathod, the Special Projects Manager for Defend Our Future. And now, without further ado, I'd first like to hand the floor over to Karen. Karen is the co-founder of the Youth and Climate Change Network of Costa Rica. And Karen, how was the consultations you hosted last week? How are young people thinking about green jobs? And what suggestions do you have for governments currently working on their recovery plans?
Thanks, Jayatma. Well, yeah, since the pandemic, many young people are unemployed, more than before. Actually, I am one of these unemployed young people affected by this crisis. I had a job and I lost it because of this. But we can work to fix it? Sure, through green jobs. Green jobs are decent jobs that restore and preserve the environment, either by improving manufacturing process or the final product, or both, and at the same time ensure a good quality of life. Green jobs are an excellent sustainable alternative to recover not just jobs, but our economies, societies, and environment as well from COVID-19. How? Giving opportunities to youth through expanding clean and renewable energies, pushing for organic and local agriculture, developing technologies that help us have access to greener manufacturing process and cleaner transportation, investing in conservation activities and ecotourism, and supporting emerging green business developed by young people. Youth are the key. If the youth of this generation have opportunities to create and have green jobs, we can say that the future generations will be better off. We will have more resilient economies, and we will have a healthy environment. And that means that we can prevent other pandemics and crises as a consequence like this. We cannot think that we can have a better future if the youth today don't have real and green opportunities. because it's not like this. That's why our suggestions to our government and all the generations who are making the decisions of our present are: consider green economy, green jobs, and circular economy as new alternatives to have more resilient economies and build social well-being. Ensure the space for the youth to participate in decision-making process. Provide subsidies for green startups by young people. Ensure access to financial schemes to help finance green initiatives from youth. Ensure social dialogue to integrate all realities from around the world and into the policies to have a fair transition. Provide educational programs, informal education to develop green skills and knowledge about sustainable development. Invest in young people who are working to create new technologies to help us to reduce the carbon print. Create policies to ensure decent jobs for everyone and push gender equality. Bridge the intergenerational gap. Investment in clean energy and ensure the access to the most vulnerable populations. And finally, establish links with youth organizations to participate in the implementation of green initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. If I can shortly summarize what you said, I think you highlighted the importance of the green jobs, that they restore and preserve the environment, but also young people's need for green jobs, and that it will create more resilient economies and healthier environments. You also called for the support for green startups by young people and to provide education for sustainable development and climate change. Thank you very much, Karen. Now, to add on to that and to respond to that, I now invite His Excellency, the Milenkos Konik-Tapia, the ambassador of Chile. Chile was also the host of COP25. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to participate in the World Environment Day with all of you, and particularly with the youth representatives. Thank you for that opportunity. And of course, our gratitude goes to all the organizers, and particularly to my wonderful colleagues of Ireland and the Marshall Islands. And I would like to mention also that you have done a great effort and show to the United Nations that multilingualism can be shown here in these screens, and people with different language can participate, not only the ones who know English. So I think it's a great addition for all these webinars. Coming to the subject, first of all, thank you very much, Karen, for your participation. I think that we agree basically in all the elements that you have mentioned. Of course, youth had been hit very hard on the labor market, on the jobs creation, because since they have been working for very few years, there is not such an attachment from the corporation. So maybe it's quicker and maybe cheaper as well to get rid of someone who has been only for a year or 2 years in the organization, not someone who has been for 20 or 25 years. And of course, we are going to face many challenges as countries, as economies, to put back the world to work. And we don't know when is that going to be to start. Maybe in some parts of the world, particularly the ones who are been on Europe and maybe here in the US, it will be quicker. But in our region, Latin American region, we are going now to the worst part of the COVID. So we still have some months before we can think about recovery. So on that part, I would like to say two things from the point of view of the Chile's participation. First, we are still the chairman of the COP25 because, the COP26 has been postponed now for November November next year. So we will have a long term, and we are working very strongly with the UK, with Italy, with the Secretary and Selvin Hart, who spoke earlier, in order to push the climate change agenda as well, not only the COVID agenda. And also we are part of the Climate Action Coalition here with the UN. So we're working in many areas. On that particularly, we are very strong on the commitments on the national determined contributions to make it quicker, to make it stronger, not to wait maybe until 2050 for this change on the energy resources as one of the first points you mentioned, to go to more green environmental sources of energy. And I think we will be very, we hope that to be very successful on that. From the point of view of our country, we are committed to do it much earlier than 2050. So that will be part of the contribution. Also, I would like to say that it's very important that you are an activist, you are participating here, tell the youth in the world that they should get involved more earlier in politics. There is this tendency on some parts that, okay, I don't care, something for the grown-ups, nothing will change for me, I'm unemployed and I will continue to be that. That's not always the truth. I know that it's hard, but if you participate earlier in politics, you put your voice, you organize yourself, we will be hearing more of what your needs are for the time being. At least in my country, where the vote is not compulsory, the participation of the younger generation, let's say between 18, which is the voting age, to 30 is much, much lower to the other segments of the people. So we need to that voice. On the other hand, we are going through the middle of trying to establish a new constitution for our country, where the voice of the youth must be heard, must be incorporated, and I think that's very powerful. It's not going to be easy to get into the green jobs. It's not going to be easy because the forces that keep the old system are very strong, and the old kind of job, the industrial jobs, but I think this emergency, this crisis has shown that we don't need to be only in one place to produce, to have better ideas, We are working everyone from home these days, and we are still quite productive, I must say. So, of course, there are some jobs that you need to do it in one place. I understand that. But I think that we have shown that we can do different ways to ensure that we will have a green jobs, a better future. So with that, I don't have many questions for you because I would like to hear from maybe others who would like to participate. I think that I have used my time enough, and I thank you very much for your leadership, for your strong participation, being a voice here in Latin America, and I hope that when travel can be done again, you visit many of our countries to bring your experiences, to share it with people of your age and the organizations that are in the same objectives that you are having. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I now invite our next youth speaker, Joshua Ponsum. Since we are kind of running out of time, I'm not going to go into Joshua's very accomplished bio. I will let Joshua introduce himself, but also share with us what he heard from his peers about the topic of ending subsidies for fossil fuel and pricing carbon in the consultations we had ahead of this event. Joshua, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jayatma, and thanks to everyone who was able to join us for this event. I'm very happy to be here, and I'll go straight into what came out of the consultations that was held with young people last week. I will start to say that young people are seeing that market solutions cannot be used to solve human problems now. The world moves, and there are times where ideas which were once good are not good anymore, and we need to acknowledge that. And we are headed towards a planetary emergency, so no doubt that we really need to transform the way we do things. Young people are urging member states to consider the future of the human species and provide more people and ecosystem-centered solutions instead of the current profit-oriented and profit-centered approach of dealing particularly with the fossil fuel sector. Indigenous communities are losing their lands, losing their livelihoods, and this is very important. And this is all backed by, again, the profit-centered approach of dealing with carbon in general. And hence, we are pushing that there should be focus on people and ecosystems instead of economy. I mean, there's never a time that GDP has ever been a real measure of human success, human happiness, and human well-being. And this should be the core principle of transforming the current economy and the current system we have. It is also important that the current tax regulations for pricing carbon for countries who have it, for countries who do not have it and are thinking of it, should realize that you cannot price the carbon emission itself, but you also have to price the resulting impacts that comes out from that emission. So the price should be that significant, taking into consideration the effect once the carbon also comes out. It is important to also see that the subsidies, the taxes and the money taken from the fossil fuel sector should go into funding carbon neutral and green initiatives. And most significantly, subsidies towards the fossil fuel sector is an absolutely robbery against the current generation. And I say robbery because we know that the production of CO2 and the fact that we've already exceeded our budget makes it very critical that producing any further CO2 emissions is leading towards disasters which young people have to face. And hence, this is a robbery against our future and should actually be classified as a crime, if I could say so. Moving forward, it is very important that we support green initiatives to be very competitive. Say competitive because there are a lot of the solutions are there and we know this. They might not have all the backup to be able to compete with traditional systems, but the backup is not there because they do not have an enabling environment, the policies and the resources to be able to do so. And if subsidies are then given to this traditional fossil fuel sector, it makes it even more difficult for green initiatives to thrive. And hence, there should be focus in providing subsidies rather to green initiatives towards the green sector and not towards the fossil fuel sector. Young people are also urging leaders to adopt a triple helix approach by connecting academics, policymakers, and the industry together. From the submission that honorable member from Chile just said, that it's going to be difficult for us to get the industry away. This is true, but it's also very possible to connect it with the current academic system, that young people who are thinking of a very transformative future can see how they can transform the existing industry to be able to adapt to what we see as our future. And it's been said so many times that the future is us. And as a matter of fact, we are also the now. We are also now currently, because we are the driving force of the now. We don't have the political power. We do not have the decision-making necessarily. And opportunities like this allow us to put our inputs forward. But also we are here and we want a future that is very aligned with what we see for ourselves. And hence, this triple helix approach will be very important to connect our studies, our academic system now, so that we learn for the future and do not learn based on the past. This is very important. Now, having said this from the consultation and from my personal input as well, let me add that Martin Luther King Jr. once said that if you are going to think, you might as well think big. I think that we do not really need subsidies at all, and we do not need carbon pricing at all. Saying this because we've exceeded our budget, giving opportunity for anybody to pollute, it's just not right. Hence, there should be focus and the financial investment should go into projects, industries, and companies that are rather sequestrating carbon rather than emitting carbon. This will be how we will recover better together. This is how we can recover better for young people and the future that lies ahead of them. We can recover better together. This is possible. We can really build resilient communities. Yes, this is possible. That this is only possible if we do not give any room to contribute towards the problem we have now. The future is for all of us. The future is for those who are yet to come, and it is our shared responsibility now to make that future possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joshua. And if I could take 3 takeaways from your intervention right now, it is to eliminate the subsidies for fossil fuel-based activities and raise taxes on polluters. The money from carbon pricing should go into supporting green initiatives. And you also urge member states to provide people-centered solutions and what you call the triple helix approach as we connect universities, industries, and governments to drive a carbon carbon-free future. Thank you so much, Joshua, for those very precise recommendations that you presented. And I now invite the distinguished representative from the United Kingdom, Tom Woodruff, to react to Joshua's comments right now. And just to mention also, the United Kingdom is also the host of the upcoming COP26. So I think this is very opportune for us to have you present right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Jayathma. I hope you can hear me. Thank you very much to you. Thank you to the co-hosts, of course, Ireland and the Marshall Islands for organizing today's excellent event. And of course, thank you to Joshua. He's right. I think we would all agree he's right. We need to transform the way we do things. I think that, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Super.
And see you.
Super. Yeah, we need to transform the way we do things. I think we all recognize that now. And I think if there is one positive that we can take from the horrific COVID-19 crisis of the last few months, it is the opportunity to do so. And it's the opportunity to recover better, for us all to recover better in more inclusive and sustainable and a fairer way, and to invest in a greener future. And as our Prime Minister said at the Secretary General's event on financing for development last week, we owe it to future generations to do so and to build back better and base our recovery on solid foundations, including a fairer, greener, and more resilient global economy. And I'm sure that all the not so young people, as you very delicately and kindly described us this morning, Jayathma, would agree with that. And as the Minister said earlier, every country, I think, now faces a choice. You can either lock in a high emission pathway, or you move to a greener, more resilient way of doing things. And we know that some governments, in fact, probably many governments, worry that doing the latter will hold back their economic development. And there is a risk, as the Minister said, I think, that many might make the wrong choice. But we need to be clear, and we know, and we have the facts and we have the data to prove it, that green growth also benefits our economies. So it's not a choice between one or the other. And if I can just perhaps use the UK's experience to illustrate that a little bit, the UK has managed to grow its economy by 75% since 1990, whilst also managing to cut emissions by 43%. So it's not one at the expense of the other. And over the past decade, our reliance on coal has fallen dramatically. So in 2012, coal made up more than a third of our total electricity generation. By last year, it was 2.1%. And last month, we had our first entire month without coal-fired electricity since 1882. And if we can do this, other countries can do it as well. And we need a united front. We all need to be doing this and working together. And of course, a key driver in the reduction, of fossil fuels is the price we put on carbon in the electricity sector. So we've made it more expensive to use coal. We've made it more competitive to invest in renewables. And this has had a transformative effect on the electricity market. And earlier this week, we announced plans for a new cap and trade system that will be a key pillar in helping us reach net zero emissions by 2050, capping the CO2 that the power and industrial sectors can emit. Yet, I mean, we know, and it's a fact, that carbon pricing faces many challenges around the world. And although the amount of global greenhouse gas covered by implemented or planned pricing schemes is going up, the World Bank calculates that fewer than 5% of those are priced at a level consistent with meeting the Paris Agreement goals cost effectively. But we also need to think about who feels the cost of this price. And it's a tricky conversation, and it's a tricky set of decisions to make. So we need to be able to build policy frameworks that work for everyone. And it's also not enough simply for the UK or a small handful of other governments to do this alone. So we need to be able to work together. We need to be able to support each other. We need to be able to share best practice, and we need to be able to share experience. And of course, finance is key to this too. So I'm pleased that with other donors, the UK has already helped over 20 countries in the global south with climate finance. And as Selwyn, I think, talked about COP26 earlier, I think we are all disappointed that the current circumstances has forced us to postpone COP26 until November next year. But I know certainly for the UK as COP26 president, and I know that I speak for our partners, Italy too, and of course the current COP president, our Chilean friends, that in no way does that postponement or that delay mean a delay in action or a lowering ambition in any way whatsoever. And I think if anything, I hope that this additional time and the urgency of the discussions that the COVID crisis has generated around the importance of recovering better and more cleaner means that actually this space that has opened up will allow us to raise our ambition and raise our, all of us to raise our collective ambition. And so it'll be even higher. And we're determined to work with everybody in the run-up to Glasgow on negotiations of Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, for example, which will put in place the framework that is necessary, which countries can use carbon trading to meet their targets and to raise their ambition. But we also want an inclusive process. And so we talked about the importance of that. We very much agree with that. So we have drawn up a roadmap that kind of charts the way from here through to Glasgow next year. And I would be very happy to share that with anyone on the call who might be interested, who might want to get in touch with me. And that roadmap sets out how we will engage and consult with colleagues going forward over the next few months. And I think having the voices of youth within that as part of that process is critical to ensuring that our overall level of collective ambition remains as high as it can possibly be. So as I say, I'm very happy to share the details of that, and I would be very keen to have feedback on that roadmap and what more that the UK as incoming COP26 president can do to ensure as an inclusive process as possible and that the voices of youth are factored into it. I did have a question, if I may, and it doesn't necessarily need to be answered now, and I'd be very happy for maybe Joshua to come back offline with the answer to this, if it would be helpful. But I'm really interested in this idea of the triple helix, which connects universities, industries, and governments, and learning a little bit more about what is kind of behind that idea and how that idea might work in practice, and again, how we can use that idea to inform the discussions in the run-up to COP26 in Glasgow next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom. Joshua, can I invite you back for 30 seconds just to give us a quick answer to the question that Tom raised? And I think this is really the kind of conversation that I would like to have member states and young people having a conversation together. So thank you for the question. And Joshua, please come back and give us an answer for that.
Thank you very much. So quick one because of the time. The way we see the triple helix idea working is that currently most academic work of young people do not really get into implementation. So most master theses, most bachelor theses are done to just achieve this academic purpose. How do we get industries to put forward their challenges in terms of transformation to the academic sector? How do we then link that to the ministries in terms of how they could formulate a policy around that? And how do we then get the young people to work on both the market solution and also the policy development process and come up with that solution, which can then serve the political purpose of putting the policy in place, and also getting the market or the businesses to apply that through the transformation process. So this will be my brief response, and I'm really happy to get back to you, Tom, together with some of the youth folks who really pursue this, push this idea forward, so we could set up like a team to brainstorm around this and see how we can actually take this to the COP. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joshua. And with that, I'm handing over the floor to Kathy. Kathy, please share with us how the consultations on the better accounting of climate-related risks and opportunities and the global financial systems went. What were some of the key ideas that came from those consultations you held?
Thank you, Jetma, for the introduction. It's an honor to speak to youth advocates around the world and to representatives from UN member states. I'm glad that despite the circumstances, we can still share important ideas across generations and across different time zones virtually. The COVID-19 crisis has made it evident that unless we build resilience within all spectrums of our society and economy, we are only as strong as our most vulnerable sections. Like COVID, the climate crisis knows no geopolitical or socioeconomic boundaries of the world. and hence it calls for a consolidated effort in designing and implementing the solutions. The current crisis has hit us hard, but it has brought us to a crucial fork in our path forward. We can choose to break away from the conventional ways, set the course right for a 100% clean economy, and secure a better future for the generations to come. We have an opportunity to rebuild better together. The financial decisions and investments we make today to recover from this crisis, if done right, can create the systemic change we need to address the climate issues at the speed and scale required. Speaking on behalf of 1.8 billion young people who will have to live with the consequences of your choices for the decades to come, I'm asking the decision makers listening today to not just speak about rebuilding better, but to put actual finances behind it. Here are the 5 ways I recommend. First and foremost, ensure that no one is left behind when we emerge out of this crisis. Through the right financial and resource allocations, we need to enable capacity building, technology transfer, and system strengthening to build resilience in developing countries. At the same time, we need to implement stringent climate mitigation solutions in developed countries with higher GHG footprints. Carbon markets will be a crucial tool. International cooperation through markets lowers the cost of climate action, and this savings can make much more climate ambition possible. Second, create structural shifts in our global financial system. We need to place climate risks and opportunities at the heart of all investment strategies. Putting a price on carbon so polluters can't pollute for free is essential. And moving forward, our investments should lead towards a 100% clean economy and nothing less. All public and private investments should go through a green screening to ensure alignment with the 1.5 degrees Celsius target. Third, the financial flows should be directed to enhance our environment through tropical forest protection, carbon removal, coastal restoration, and emission reduction mechanisms. We urge the private sector to lead innovation and implementation of such solutions, and the policymakers to create the right incentives and accountability mechanisms to accelerate this global transition. Fourth, the huge spending undertaken by governments to revive the economy and to bail out businesses from the impacts of COVID-19 should be directed to strengthen the clean energy sector and green businesses. These are the industries that will give us the most for our investments: strong, stable jobs that won't cause harmful pollution. Governments should refrain from bailing out polluters and carbon-intensive industries that will worsen the climate crisis. Additionally, any support given must include stronger environmental restrictions. Lastly, stimulus funding used for infrastructure projects should take the climate crisis into account and strive to mitigate the negative impacts on nature. Furthermore, the capital projects and financial assistance strategies should prioritize the growth of small businesses and the most vulnerable communities. By harnessing these 5 key actions in directing financial flows, we can recover from COVID-19 crisis to a future that avoids the worst impacts of the climate crisis, the only future where young people can thrive. While we have a huge task ahead of us, I feel hopeful to see this multilateral collaboration and youth leadership to help push us to the right turn at this fork in the road where we stand now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy, for your 5-point summarization of the consultations that went into the global financial flows discussion. I'm now going to pass the floor to the distinguished representative from France, Sophie Goudabi, and invite to respond to what Kathy has mentioned right now. The representative from France, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. First of all, I would like to thank Ireland, the Marshall Islands, and you for your tremendous job on climate and youth climate action. As you probably know, President Macron has set up an advisory citizen climate council, une convention citoyenne pour le climat, in which young people play a great part. And for us, it's important because as many before me have already said, we believe that young people who have played a tremendous role in keeping momentum on climate are fully part of the Recover Better part. I would also like to thank Kiati for our very relevant recommendations. And I can only say that I fully share her assessment, as I share the views of the two previous speakers on this matter. As you have very well pointed out, climate action now must be framed within the new reality of COVID-19. And this means that the recovery from COVID-19 have to fully integrate the objectives of the Paris Agreement and the Agenda 2030. We believe that COVID-19 offers an unprecedented opportunity to fully restructure economies so that they are more equitable and more resilient to future shocks, and driven by green growth that can achieve net zero emissions by 2050. And this crisis should also provide an opportunity to build back better, ensuring that stimulus programs prioritize investments in cleaner energy alternatives and new green jobs and businesses, low carbon fiscal policies, phasing out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies, and putting a halt to a new coal plant construction. So just as the three previous young speakers have said, and to give you a concrete example, in France, we already implement this kind of measures, applying bailout policies and eco-conditionalities in all the new stimulus packages that are being put in place. And as Katie said, in this context, climate finance is more important than ever, and will have to be directed towards transitional investments in an equitable and just manner, making it possible to reduce risk, to guarantee that the system's resilience to environmental shocks can support the most vulnerable countries. So as I said, the Paris Agreement and the Agenda 2030 are all compasses for exploring these transformational public policies, such as the creation of green jobs, and while respecting a just transition. Maybe if I may, a final word, to say that this crisis also highlights the links between climate, health, and biodiversity. And we should not forget that in these stimulus packages, or in the NDCs, as the previous speakers have also mentioned, ambition should be raised both on climate and biodiversity, because the two topics are very much interlinked. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the representative of France. Kathy, do you have any reflections or any feedback or comments to those ideas?
Thank you, Jayatama. I would just quickly emphasize the point I just made, that there is an opportunity here and we just need to make sure that we don't miss out on it. Experts are telling us the recovery packages designed and implemented by governments to rescue the ailing global economy could rise as high as $20 trillion over the next 18 months. We need to ensure that we are mindful of the impacts of our investments and spending and leverage the opportunity it presents to address the climate crisis. And I urge you to implement these ideas and bring together other member states to do the same.
Thank you very much, Kathy. There were no specific question for you, Karen, but I wonder if you also want to come in here and say something really quickly before I wrap up this segment.
No worries. Yeah, I would like to say that, yeah, the young people are working to take place into the decision-making process. And because, of course, as Joshua said, we don't have like this power of decision officially, but if we are there, if we are raising our voices, it's possible that the people who are taking decisions can include our voices and our necessities as well. And I would like to highlight that it's very important to include in this transition to a green recovery all realities, because not all people are living this pandemic and this quarantine at the same way. And this is very important to see. And this is a big challenge that we have in the young people. We are working to highlight this. So please, to the all member states who are here and who are in the decision-making process, please include youth in this process, and please listen our voices, because young people are really really working. We are really worried about, but we are a generation prepared and ready to take action. So the intergenerational dialogue is pretty important, and I really hope that this dialogue that we are having here, it's not the last one, that it's just the beginning to many of dialogues that we can have to recovering better together.
Thank you so much, Karen. And precisely the idea behind this dialogue was to create this interactive discussion between young people and member states. And I'm so glad to see, even in the chat box, when a PR says, I'm the permanent representative of this country, all the young people on the chat comes and say, so I'm also from this country. And we are already developing some networks and connections right here on this Zoom platform. So thank you so much to our youth speakers, to the member states who contributed. Let me remind you once more, you can go to bit.ly/youth choice poll and tell us how you are feeling about the conversations we are having right now. Send us your ideas, to your questions, both to the member states and to the young speakers as well. So with this, I'm wrapping up this segment. I want to thank especially the youth organizations who partnered on this session. We had YUNGO, the official constituency of UNFCCC, particularly Hita and other colleagues from there. The youth voices that we had in Abu Dhabi preparation meeting last year, the 30 young people has constantly engaged with us since Abu Dhabi. Thank you so much for all of you as well. And Re-Earth organization, Re-Earth initiative, a part of Fridays for Future, who has also been with us since the beginning. They're not paid like me and the member states who are a part of the conversations here. They're doing all of this work voluntarily amidst losing their education and losing their jobs. So I have massive respect for all of you for volunteering your time to join us, prepare this, and allocating your resources and ideas to enlighten all of us today. Thank you so much, and over to you, Ambassador Geraldine.
Thank you, dear Jayathma, and all those wonderful speakers. It's been a fascinating panel. Thank you very much indeed. We could do this all day, clearly, and I have many comments and questions coming in from our ambassadors and our colleagues here in New York. But we have, technically speaking, 10 minutes left. We'll run a little over time, but what I propose we do to make the best use of this time and to get that interactivity still going is that we listen to the interventions of the member states. We have 12, we've closed our speakers list for member states. We have 12 colleagues who will intervene, and then we'll go back to our youth panelists. And indeed, Minister Bruton, if you still wish to intervene, Elizabeth, Selwyn, we're interacting at the end of these interventions from member states. Could I ask member states to stick to being as economical as they can? This has been a great session. Let's keep the interactivity as close as we can to the heart of the business. As I give you the floor now, I hope that you'll pick up on the really important points we've heard from our youth voices about what I think Minister Bruton called the bonds of community. We've shown this works in COVID. How can we get that urgency and that strong bond of community to help us along in climate activity? And also, frankly, looking at the youth climate activism we've seen on the screen this morning, how can we here amplify that, harness it, actually get down to the job of working with our youth climate activists, advice and engagement. So I'll read the list so you all know who you are and where you're coming, and then we'll go as quickly as we can through before coming back to hear those wonderful voices of youth. And I'll hand over then at the end to my colleague Matlin to close the session. So the first speaker this morning is our colleague Rodrigo of Costa Rica, followed by Pierre Martin of Denmark, followed by Bakhtiar, our colleague from Uzbekistan. Then we move to Stefano, the ambassador in Italy, Australia, Ambassador Mitch, Jordan, Suduk, and then we move to Finland with Yerki. Then we go to Augustin, my colleague from Spain. Dear Sherith Norman, the Deputy Permanent Representative of the United States, Nuno of Portugal, Silvio, our Deputy Permanent Representative of the European Union, followed by Carol of Germany. So I will give the floor now to Rodrigo and ask you all to be as economical as you can, and we'll come back to our youth speakers at the end of the intervention. So Rodrigo, you have the floor. Rodrigo of Costa Rica, you have the floor. We're not hearing you, Rodrigo. Okay, Rodrigo, I will come back to you. Martin of Denmark. Oh, you're there. Okay, go ahead, Rodrigo.
Thank you. I was just promoted to panelist. It's thrilling to be here with you and thrilling to hear the young persons who have taken the floor. And for me, particularly to hear Karen Proa from Costa Rica, and also to know that Sofia Hernandez is there among the organizers. Yes, Karen, you are well prepared. Yes, Karen, you are the generation that is going to take over. The Minister of Ireland mentioned the fact that the youth took over the parliament for one day. Take it for more days in Costa Rica, please. Take it for more days, take it for a week, take it for a month, because you have the answers. That I've been insisting in that you have the answers to get all those green jobs and to get that green evolution that Costa Rica and the world needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear Rodrigo. Now to my friend and colleague, Martin of Denmark.
Thank you, Geraldine. Can you hear me? No, I want to begin by thanking Jayatma and then thank you, Geraldine and Amadlan for organizing this event. But I think more in general for your leadership on including and engaging youth in a meaningful way. I think today's meeting is just yet another excellent example of how we can create these intergenerational discussions about issues such as today's event. And this is a personal reflection. You know, we need this type of leadership and these innovative approaches at the UN and all its charter bodies, the General Assembly, the Economic and Social Council, and we need it at the Security. We need it at the Security Council. I don't need to tell you that Denmark is firmly committed to including youth not only in discussions but actually also decisions that concerns all of us. And I was proud to see the president of the Danish Youth Climate Council at this event today, by far the most important Dane at today's event. Now, I think the immediate COVID-19 crisis and the much bigger challenge of climate change are, of course, both unprecedented crises for the international community, and business as usual will not cut it. But as we recover from COVID-19, we do have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to transformally shift our societies to a more sustainable, inclusive, and resilient pathway, and at the same time tackle climate change. We simply need to build back better and greener. And as Monica said, we have to kill two birds with one stone, because there is only one stone, and that stone we are borrowing from future generations. Now, to all the young people out there, I think there is an open moment. You know, the world is realizing that we are together. We are together across the globe and across generations. So we need you, and we need much more than your voices. We need your thinking. We need your action. We need your leadership. We need your drive, and then we need your ability to not only embrace but to drive change. Because if COVID has taught us anything, that is that we would only get out of this together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear Martin. Very wise words in every sense. I'm happy to go to Bakhtiar, our colleague from Uzbekistan. You have the floor, Bakhtiar.
Thank you, Geraldine. First of all, I would like to commend the parent mission of Ireland and the Marshall Islands for convening this important event. And I would like also to commend the UN Secretary General Special Envoy for her leadership in promoting the right and interest of young people. Today, we have heard a lot of excellent ideas from bright young leaders, you know, on the taking of the current situation, how to address the climate change, also to promote green economy. On my part, I would like today, given the presence of so many bright leaders, to inform them about one important initiative has put forward by our country, by Uzbekistan, namely to develop and adopt a UN Convention on Youth Rights. That should be a unified international legal instrument aimed at the formation and implementation of youth policy in the age of globalization and rapid development of information and communication technologies. From our perspective, the adoption of such a legal document would significantly increase the rights and opportunities of young people. Convention main goal is to augment effort at the global, regional, and national levels. To meet the need of youth, strengthen the capacity and expand their rights, freedom, and best interest of the young people across the globe. Taking this opportunity, I hope that the UN member states would extend their overwhelming support of this initiative, and they would join a group of friends that currently is being formed to advance this initiative. And on its part, Uzbekistan stands ready to work together with member states, with Secretary General's Envoy on Youth and other stakeholders in promoting this initiative and bring it to fruition. I think that the adoption, as I already mentioned, would make a big difference for the youth and would better define their role in the contemporary world. And I wish all speakers today from young generation all the best in their future endeavors. They have big potential, and I think they would succeed in their future all endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Back to your, and sounds like an excellent initiative. Now our next two speakers are Stefano, the Deputy Permanent Representative of Italy, followed by Mitch, our ambassador from Australia. So Stefano, you have the floor. Stefano, we're not hearing you. Can you unmute yourself?
Can you hear me now? Very good. So I'll start from the beginning. First off, let me say this was an extraordinary, interesting event. Congratulations on organizing it. We heard a lot of very balanced and mature hints from the young speakers. I have just one message to them and one point of information to share. The message is, I think this discussion confirmed once again that we need this push from the young generation in order to make the right choices, in order to make the right choices with the right level of ambition and with the right, I would say, long-term perspective. And their capacity to influence decisions should never be underestimated, because the youth are, first of all, citizens. So being citizens, they are full-fledged actors of our society. And they are also electors. So by definition, governments and also political parties will be interested in listening to them. And third, they are consumers. So they have the power to orient or reorient the decision-making of private investors and to redirect profits in different directions. Concerning the point of information that I wanted to share, our UK friend Tom was kind enough to recall our partnership with UK in preparing for COP26 in Glasgow next year. As you know, we will have the honor and the responsibility to host the pre-COP, the event that precedes the COP in Glasgow. And we also will have the responsibility to host a big event completely devoted to the youth. And this will be called the Youth for Climate event. And this will be organized in a back-to-back sequence with the pre-COP in order to fit in the contents of the pre-COP. And this is something that we had already organized for this year, and then the decision came to postpone COP26. As Tom said, the new dates for COP26 were adopted last week. So as a consequence, we will also set the new dates for the preparatory events in Italy, but the event will remain the same as we had conceived it to be. The additional element that I wanted to share with you is that we will not remain inactive in the meanwhile, and we do want to start a conversation leading up to this big event next year. And this will take the form of a series of webinar discussions completely devoted to the youth voices. And it will be done in thematic issues accordingly with the main issues in the agenda for the COP. And one theme will certainly be the Build Back Better that we discuss here at the UN. So just to say that this is a conversation that will be continued. Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear Stefano, and that we need you remark, a very important one, but that Italy in pre-COP has very concrete ways of engaging you, really important message. So now we go to dear Mitch, our colleague from Australia, followed by Jordan. Mitch, you have the floor.
Thanks, Geraldine, and thank you so much, Madeline and Jathma. What a fantastic discussion it's been. Australia is really keen to explore ways that we can make sure that we engage with youth in climate discussion. We really stepped up at COP26, our briefings and our policy discussions with Australian youth. We're currently in discussion with Australian youth about setting up a working group to make this more formal and to make it more regular. And I should also mention that Australia recently released a climate and energy technology roadmap for consultation. And again, we're particularly seeking submissions from youth. More broadly, Australia, we're working to our Paris Agreement commitments, and we're making sure that we do that in a way that builds back better for low emissions, climate and disaster resilience, not just at home, but also with our Pacific Island colleagues. I just want to very quickly pick up a point that Karen raised about jobs and jobs when it comes to the post-COVID environment and jobs in the environment of dealing with climate. And just quickly to touch on, I guess, the who, what, when, where, why, and how of jobs in that environment. I think jobs, it was just so important to raise because the heart of COVID recovery is going to be a job, making sure that people have them. In terms of the where, I think we're going to see something interesting post-COVID. There'll be more of an emphasis on local jobs close to where people live. Commuting isn't so attractive in the post-COVID world. Suburbs with lower density, where that's possible, will be more attractive. Not commuting, probably better for the environment as well. So I think in terms of jobs, we'll probably see an emphasis on local technology, and what will change the what of jobs. The how of jobs, we're going to need to change our trade and skilling of people and the institutions that deliver that. Obviously, the when is now, and the who, we're going to make sure that we have the jobs for our young people when they graduate, when they finish their education. So just so pleased that the jobs was mentioned there by Karen. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much indeed, Mitch. A big agenda. Now we have Jordan, Finland, followed by my colleague Augustin of Spain. So we go to Jordan next. Sadiq, you have the floor.
Thank you, Excellency. First, allow me to thank you for this organization of such an important platform for dialogue. And I would like also to thank all brilliant young speakers and panelists as well, who gave us a treasure of knowledge with their contribution. I want to assure you that Jordan has put youth and sustainable development on the core of its future strategies and work, and it has been quite a while now where we enforce this direction. It's very important at this junction to acknowledge the need to address some issues. Most of that is basically regarding the future of our future, which is the young generations. And for that, it's very important to address the issue of unemployment in general. If there's anything good that can come from this horrific COVID pandemic and tragedy, it's a big lesson for humankind. We cannot cross alone. We need to join a joint effort. We need to establish the practice of being a unit to function together. And it's very important at this junction also to, if you allow me to highlight 3 important things that we need to realize. That there is a need to embrace evolution in the educational system. As Joshua said, we need to learn for the future, but not from the past. From the past, it has its own dynamics, and the future is also having new realities, and that we need to address. We need to be to build an education system that is responsive to market dynamics and is able to produce generations that can really get into the new technologies and the new needs for the future. There's also the evolution of the human value system. We need to acknowledge that climate change issue is not only a physical or, let's say, phenomenon. It's also we owe them to the future generations to have a livable climate in the future. They have the right to. They have the right to have clean air, clean water, and we need to acknowledge that. It's the new set of human rights that is coming at a crucial juncture now. We need to have the insightful reading of our future. Transformation is very important. It's needed, and yes, it's true that not much of funds has been accessible for less developed countries, and developing countries are also struggling. But transformation in patterns of production and consumption that are friendly to our environment and our climate is very crucial at this point. There is a new evolution in the markets of economies. There is green economy and blue economy, and I can tell you that there's also an orange economy as well. We need to invest on IT. We need to invest in clean energy. We need to promote the financial instruments to be deployed for a green business and startups. We need to encourage our youth to have the idea of pursuing jobs that are climate and environment friendly by incentives, financial incentives that overcome the guarantee problems when it comes to loans for startups and SMEs. I thank you very much, Excellency, and I can count on our future having this quality of young people who are having their planet at their heart. I can tell you that we need to enjoy the living in a clean environment and climate change. As we say, there is no planet B. Thank you very much, Excellency.
Thank you indeed, dear Siddiq, and I share your optimism about the brilliant young people who are taking their future into their own hands. Colleagues, we're now 10 minutes over time, and we still have 6 speakers before we have our final session. So please keep your comments as economical as you can. I'm going to go to Jyrki of Finland, followed by Agustin of Spain. You have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador, and many thanks to Marshall Islands, and others for gathering us here today. And many thanks also for the representatives of the youth for their ideas and for pushing us to do better in building back green. As has been said today many times, the world is transforming by the COVID crisis, but as we see, the public support for climate action still remains high across countries. And the pandemic has shown that we can act quickly and at scale when faced with this immense risk. If we miss the opportunity, on the other hand, and attempt to return to the dangerous models of the past, the legacy of the pandemic could lead to a whole series of damaging social, environmental, and economic emergencies. The consequences of a prolonged global depression could be profoundly damaging, and unmanaged climate change catastrophic. In recent weeks, Finland has been involved in cooperation in various forums in designing a blueprint for green recovery. We will use all available channels and fora, such as the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action that Finland is chairing with Chile, to actively engage in sharing experiences and ideas for green recovery. Finance ministers will need to design and introduce comprehensive, longer time horizon stimulus packages to promote recovery and build back better. There are several paths we can take in recovery. A path to build back better, where recovery packages aim to grow the denominator of debt GDP through productive investment, is both attractive and possible. The Helsinki Principles, developed by the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action, provides guidance on green recovery. The path to building back better will require expenditures on investments that are fast, labor intensive in the short run, and have high multipliers. In this context, the evidence points to green investments doing better on all these dimensions. They also address climate risk at the same time and have other attractive co-benefits. Green investments are available in a broad range of productive complementary assets, including physical and human capital, knowledge and intangible capital, as well as natural and social capital. It will be important for the coalition to build on this evidence and to bring country experience and further evidence to bear. I would like to suggest for the youth to focus on the design and implementation of green recovery processes. We have to invest in education and employment that provides youth with the skills needed for the labor market of tomorrow, not those that were needed in the past. We expect multilateral development banks to provide clear explanations on how projects are aligned with the national determined contributions and the Paris Agreement, and will push the MDBs to propose models for carbon pricing. We have committed to a recapitalization of the Nordic Development Fund, recognizing the fund's purpose to advance Nordic leadership in addressing climate change and development financing. We will engage with the Nordic financial sector to highlight how the private sector can lead in making finance flows consistent with the pathways towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient development. We will also engage in action, expanding access to clean water and sustainable energy in sub-Saharan Africa. The Nordic Africa Ministerial meeting on development and climate is currently being discussed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jyrki. Can I just warn us all about the time again? We're very close to having to conclude without hearing all our speakers. The next speaker is Augustin of Spain, followed by Portugal, then Silvio of the EU and Karen of Germany, before we get back to hear the important voices of youth again. Augustin, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Geraldine. Thank you to Ireland, the Marshall Islands, the organizers and the speakers, and very especially the youth representative who have been at the forefront of the struggle for a just climate and building resilience. Spain signed with enthusiasm the Cuon-Gage Pledge ahead of the Climate Action Summit, and we noted with satisfaction that the Youth Climate Track and the social and political drivers, one of them led by Spain with Peru, were put together under a common framework, people-centered action now. Spanish commitment with an ecological transition to a net zero path by 2050 is firm. Furthermore, we are specifically focused on a decarbonization policies that leaves no one behind. Policies that create not only green, but decent jobs, helping the workers and sectors most affected by the transition. Policies that take special care on the most vulnerable to climate change, women, girls, young people, and migrants. One of the commitments of our government is to create a citizens' assembly on climate change to strengthen the civil society participation. And policies, today more than ever, that protect the air quality and the health of the population, especially in urban areas. We have learned the death mortality of COVID-19 was also linked to air pollution. The message we share with all of you, it's simple. We don't have to choose between economic growth with job creations and climate action, because this time, the only possible recovery is a green and blue recovery. The key question is reinforcing political will, and that means more citizen action and more democracy, our most powerful instruments for change. Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear Augustin. Now, Nuno, followed by Silvio and Karen. Nuno of Portugal.
Thank you. I'd like to echo others before me in commending the organizers for this timely discussion. Let me express a special gratitude to the ambassadors of Ireland and Marshall Islands, and so to the special envoy on youth, Jatmaya, for her thoughtful remarks. But above all, thank you to the youth representatives for sharing their ideas. More than ever, we need them. Now, Portugal has been investing in youth participation through our national plan for youth with cross-ministerial programs not only related to youth issues, but focus also on employment, health, well-being, environment, agricultural, inclusion, migration, and the list goes much longer. You mentioned the importance of the bond of community, and that bond became visible in the current pandemic. More than 3,000 Portuguese youth voluntaries helped the most vulnerable, especially elderly people and isolated communities, by supporting the delivery of food and medicine, giving advice from public support, service, and disseminating health support programs. Now, I would remiss myself if I did not introduce the color blue into the Recover Better and recall that the decision to hold a youth forum on the margins of the UN Oceans Conference, scheduled to take place in Lisbon. My question for the young leaders is, as we see this strong push towards building back better, and public policies are starting to align themselves with this mantra, if it were up to you, and in very short years, it will very much be up to you, where would you start? Thank you.
Thanks, Nuno. Looking forward to hearing the answer to your question. Now we go to Silvio of the European Union, followed by Karen of Germany, before we get back to hear our youth respondents. Silvio.
Thank you, Geraldine, and congrats for this extremely interesting and interactive event. It shows that when young people are involved, all the technical hurdles are overcome and things work perfectly fine. I just wanted to start with a positive message that despite the pandemic and despite all the challenges we're faced these days, the EU has not lost its ambition on climate and environment. And we see the recovery as a chance to move even faster in the right direction. And we want to use that chance. But I think that the reason why we're doing this is because of you. It's because of young people that keep on pressuring their governments and, and they're ready to make their voice heard. So we keep our ambition to be climate neutral by 2050. We want to propose more ambitious emission targets, reduction targets in autumn. And we also are discussing a new budget for the next 7 years, which really puts the European Green Deal at its core. So that will be, the red thread of our future action. Plus, I think something which is very important, we want to launch a climate pact later this year, a pact that brings together all parts of society around the climate action, and youth will definitely play a huge part in this. So it's very important that you participate in this and you push the agenda forward. we also want to have an integrated approach to the crisis. It's not just climate change, but it's also biodiversity loss, it's pollution, it's resource depletion. We have to look at all these things together. And that's what the Green Deal is about. And I just want to make a remark about green jobs. We see energy transition, circular economy, and nature restoration as three areas with enormous job potential. But in order to make use of this potential, we need to invest in the right skills. And there I really think that Joshua made a super important point in saying that we need to bring in, school, universities and industry together. My question to you is not a question, is almost like a plea. You know that we are determined as EU to support the Secretary General's efforts to talk to the major emitters and ensure that they come up with more ambitious plans. How do you see your role there? I think you've become a global community. So can you sort of join forces with your friends in those countries and push the agenda forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Silvio. A voice from Europe, the European Union really leading the charge there. Great to hear about the Climate Pact, and looking forward to hearing the response to your question. And Karen from Germany, you have the final word before we get back to those young voices. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you very much also to the young speakers today. We very much welcome the active role of young people on climate action. And I think last September here in New York, your participation and also the many young people that took to the streets worldwide really helped to raise the attention for the necessity and the urgency of climate action. Young people have a very powerful voice and also a great credibility when you call for action. And we heard very many pieces of good advice from you today. The huge disruption COVID-19 has caused in societies worldwide, and also the very sad toll it has taken in human lives, is a stark reminder what we can expect if we do not immediately take action on climate change. Germany fully supports the call to recover better with the 2030 agenda and the Paris Agreement on climate change as our framework. And also we need international solidarity, as was stressed by Chancellor Merkel last week at the high-level event on financing for development. Starting July 1st, Germany will be holding the presidency of the Council of the EU, and during that time we will work towards an agreement on raising the EU NDC. And in connection with the Green Deal, Silvio has just mentioned, and the EU stimulus measures that are currently being discussed, this will send a strong message on striving to reconcile ambitious climate targets and economic stimulus. At the national level, just 2 days ago, the federal government presented a 100 billion euro stimulus and future technologies package. And this package is also geared to climate change mitigation and to promoting technologies that will be important in the future alongside social policy components. Finally, I would appeal to you, please remain active in your own countries and also at international level as today. I will have to leave now for the session of the Peacebuilding Commission, but my colleague Eva Vogt remains online. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And unfortunately, we have run very much over time. So the Minister from Ireland has also been called back to negotiations, and Selwyn, the Assistant Secretary General, has also had to bow out. So we're really against the clock now. So we get back to hear those important voices. I'm going to really put feet to the fire and ask you individually 1.5 minutes to respond. To say to you, I'll go in the following order: Monica, Karen, Joshua, Kathy, but also to point out that this is the beginning of a conversation. We can take up many of these issues virtually, in chats, through Jayathma, in other meetings of this sort. So don't feel you have to answer everything. Monica, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. So I've been taking a lot of notes that I'm so happy with, where countries have expressed that they do want to see increased youth engagement and that they want to take real steps to also make it happen. And definitely this is the beginning of a conversation. So I've left my contact info and importantly, the contact info of the Youngo focal points so that we can exchange experiences, what works, what doesn't work, how do you build really meaningful youth engagement? Because only if we really do it in a meaningful way will really beautiful words about youth involvement also translate into acting on our priorities and, well, in the end, essentially moving the money, because that's what it's all about, right? And definitely we can start meaningful conversations between generations about how young people and governments together can force industries and other powerful stakeholders in society to do their part, because neither governments nor young people can do it alone. We also need to find good ways to move all the money and power that is out there that isn't exactly working in our favor. So I really look forward to that, and thank you so much for this very interesting event.
Super, Monica. So it's words are good, but action better, and even better as we put our money where our mouth is, essentially. So that's a not a very diplomatic way of summing up an excellent intervention from Monica. Karen, you have the floor. Karen, we're not hearing you. Do you want to take the floor again?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry because I didn't listen to the last part because it was cut, but can you repeat, please?
Karen, we asked you to take the floor again just for 1 minute to wrap up. If you have some comments, if you prefer to come at the end, that's fine.
Yeah, well, just thanks for inviting us to be part of this conversation. And as Monica said, I really hope that this is just the beginning of the conversation. As I said before, it's very important to have this intergenerational conversations and to know what's the reality of the young people around the world and every country. So thanks for that. And yeah, I leave my contact here, and it would be it will be great to have another conversation, and especially from the Latin American perspective, since I am from Costa Rica. So yeah, I just would like to highlight that we have to keep working, because talking about climate change, we have to have climate justice, but to have climate justice, we have to have and get social justice first. So keep pushing that, and please, to UN members and United Nations in general, please keep these conversations up. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. We've been listening to you. Climate justice, social justice, hand in hand. And you come from a country that expresses that extraordinarily. So thank you. Now we go to Joshua.
Thank you very much. So my quick remarks is that after listening to everything that has been said, COVID has forced us to realize the capability of policymakers, and we know that they can really take rapid action. So inaction is actually a choice that they make, because we know that it's actually possible to take action. And to answer quickly on some of the questions that came up, I will say that if I had the chance, where would I start from? I will start from education and capacity building, which is sort of the fundamentals for how we transform societies. And this is something that is not new to us. We know this already. The challenge is that we've been a bit stuck on tradition. So we really base a lot of things on tradition. This is how we do it. And hence, we prevent ourselves from transforming. So we have to start with education, transforming that sector, making sure that we are more futuristic, and at the same time putting emphasis on ethics, because we've lost our ethics. And this is also why we see all the injustice happening now. And if we can restore this, drive away from traditions and things we are very used to, this is very possible. Lastly, context matters. Context really matters. And the current youth climate movement and even the whole injustice around the world, it's really driven by people who acknowledge that when they speak, we must hear. And this has to change, that if all voices matter, and particularly to the UN, if we don't want to leave anyone behind, then the voices of everyone must matter, and we need to let this filter from the international level to the local level, say that every voice really and truly matters. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Joshua. You can be assured we believe all voices matter, but you made another point which all of us from the UN should listen to, which is that inaction is a choice that policymakers can make. So let's listen to important voices. So Kathy, you have the floor.
Thank you again for providing the floor. In response to the question about youth engagement, I would like to say that youth advocates are not only voicing their concerns and opinions, but are providing concrete solutions. And you have heard some from us today. Young professionals, students, researchers from around the world are actively using their expertise and engaging hands-on to advance climate action. They not only bring a fresh and bold perspective to the table, but also their technical expertise. Our institutions need to enable us, provide right avenues to engage. My message to fellow youth advocates would be to actively engage in the political process, vote. Young professionals should be part of the formal political system to create the change from within. And again, our institutions should enable these steps. I would like to briefly conclude here by saying that the current crisis has exposed our weaknesses, that is the inequalities, lack of preparedness, and need for multilateral coordination. Now it's up to us to acknowledge that, learn from it, and build a robust path forward towards the future that we have spoken about today. We need to ensure that our response does not solve one crisis by making another worse. And in the words of UN Secretary General, the only answer is brave, visionary, and collaborative leadership. I and my fellow youth advocates expect nothing less from our leaders and representatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. We've heard you. We want to enable you. And I think your point about having the concrete hands-on capacity, to use the term you used, you have the expertise. So be sure that those of us who are here this morning, and I say this now collectively to youth speakers, we are really humbled by what we've heard from you. And I can say to you, frankly, that I will leave this with a new sense of hope, because I know that the capacity and the ability and expertise rests in your generation's hands. And for somebody who's unfortunately not of your generation, I have to say that inspires me. So thank you very much indeed. So ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to move a little bit later than we thought to concluding. Before we do, and I hand over the floor to my dear sister Amatlan of Marshall Islands, I want to let you know we've had a poll running, which Jayatma spoke about at the top of the session. And I want to thank all of you who participated in the poll. The poll was looking at what member states' priorities should be in recovering better, and we have the results. So 53% of the respondents said they would prioritize delivering green jobs. 36% said they would prioritize removing subsidies from fossil fuels, and 11% for accounting for climate-related risks and opportunities within the global financial system. This poll is remaining open now. So for all of you, and particularly all the young people who have joined us beyond the New York bubble here this morning, we want you to continue to speak. We are listening to your voices. Weigh in, get active, get involved. Thank you again. And dear Amatlan, I'm now handing the floor over to you to introduce what I believe is a wonderful video. Dear Amatlan, you have the floor. We're not hearing you yet, Amatlan.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. In the interest of time, all protocol observed. Marshall Islands, together with our co-host, the phenomenal Geraldine Byrne Nation of Ireland. Thank you so very much for your strong leadership and very inclusive leadership as well. Together with the UN Secretariat, Selwyn, the Youth Envoy, Jayatma, the Youth Foundation, Liz Cousin, who is not a stranger to us, and youth climate leaders, and many other that I may not mention by name, but are part of this endeavor. Together, we thank you all sincerely for your kind participation in this morning World Environment Day event. Like we did last year's Climate Summit here in New York, the Marshall Islands and Ireland have joined today by a nation around the world in emphasizing a shared commitment to ensure that global youth do have an important role at the table with world leaders. Today, the world is under severe strain, which is testing the ties which bind us all together as societies and as peoples. But however great the obstacles are, leaders must be held account by the youngest and future generations to ensure that their vision and their decisions must result in a safe, resilient, and stable future, the future they want and deserve. Now, before I introduce our Minister of Environment, please note that our youth climate warriors standing behind the minister do not wear masks. That's because Marshall Islands continues to be COVID-free. And I take this opportunity to extend our heartfelt gratitude to our donor partners, the UN system, and other helping hands in keeping us prepared and COVID-free. That's it. My privilege to introduce the Honorable Christopher J. Loyak, Minister of Environment and Minister in Assistant to the President of the Marshall Islands.
Adain Christopher Jordan Loyak, title Ilukina and Marshall Island, Minister in Assistant to the President and Environment. Ipagini naman ilotan President Kabua, Kiana and Majal, Imarmian Majal, Imleona Yoga, Impilangan to the Royal Kian, Royal Civil Society, Imperial Rapuwa Lugini. Kiana and Majal, Kile Aurga and Chori Gro, Ilokachujo Lal, Ila Pokonair, Ilokamani, Lamnak, Imkongo, and Wawengo Raur, and climate change, Imnang Mijin COVID-19. Wawini Narwaloglo, Kwan Cash Pleasure, John Wawino, Ekir, and Kengo, Peran Kobike Utro, Kononogo, and climate change in COVID-19. Here, clean in a Lelop, and Chedian Chori Road and Marshall Island, Peran Kuala Lamnak, Igichen, Minagin Kononogagi.
Youth representatives must be made part of a decision-making process in regard to COVID-19 responses, because they must have a say in what will impact their future. If voices of future leaders in our nation go unsaid, unheard, and disregarded, how can they be reassured that they will be taken care of in dire times like these? Allow the youth audience to have a seat at the table so they may have the opportunity to voice out their concerns and share their ideas of strategies they believe will ensure their future. Let's listen to them.
Here in New York, our youth led in local efforts such as a TikTok challenge, a hand washing video, and a quarantine video. These local efforts presented by the youth help spread awareness of COVID-19.
As youths, we see that students both here and abroad are being affected by COVID-19. These issues are not just issues experienced and specific to the RMI, but worldwide issues. For example, students studying abroad are being stranded, some far from their homes. Students, including those abroad, are also facing times of increasing financial difficulties. Because of COVID-19, we see that the severity of some challenges that our fellow youths face. We recognize these issues and request that our students here in the RMI, as well as those studying abroad and from all over the world, be prioritized.
Although COVID is still a big problem around the world today, it is important that we don't lose sight of our fight against climate change. The RMI is one of the nations greatly impacted by climate change. And should we fail to do anything about it during this pandemic,
by the time it dies down, we will still be affected. Because of quarantine, carbon emissions in bigger countries have decreased. This shows that when faced with a crisis, the world is capable of reducing carbon emissions. We must make people realize that climate change is as big of an issue as COVID.
The Marshall Islands is still threatened by climate change, no matter the status of COVID-19. And we have to remember, we, the Marshallese people, who have thrived off of the land given to us by our ancestors, just sits 2 meters above sea level. We must recognize that climate change has become the oppressor, and that we will not compromise without a fighting chance. We, the Marshallese, stand in solidarity with Black, Brown, and Indigenous voices calling for change. With climate change already in effect, our chances of survival are threatened to a greater extent. And we ask to not be forgotten in your steps towards healing your community as well as ours.
Thank you very much indeed. Just to conclude, I wanted to go back, if the camera can also bring us back, to Jira Matlin, who is dressed in the most beautiful and wonderful Marshall Islands traditional dress, which is really very, very beautiful, Matlin. So thank you for that powerful message from the Marshall Islands, particularly for the strong young voices. We know your warriors are with us, to the wonderful voices we've had here this morning. And the main message to all of you now is that we want you to keep engaged and keep acting, keep interacting with us, keep pushing us. We are listening to you. And I join my dear sister, Matlin. Thanks to all our teams, to Tina, to Shane, to all of the teams who brought us together, to Jayatma and your team, Jayatma, and to Selwyn and the team at the UN, all our partners. It was a wonderful event. So I sign off and hope you all have a very good day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Geraldine. You're the best.